Yo, what's going on, snipers? And it's finally time. Yes, NHL 25 has dropped its video for franchise mode. It's a nice little deep dive. I'm very excited for you guys to find out finally what's in franchise mode in NHL 25. I've known about this stuff for a couple months now, thanks to the EA Creator Network and the EA NHL Design Council. And there's some very exciting things coming this year. If you guys have not seen the full deep dive video, I highly recommend go check it out. Link will be in the description of the video below. And yeah, let's react to this. I have not seen this before, so I'm curious to see what they end up bringing up in this video. And obviously, I will break down everything that I know. And if you guys have any questions below, feel free to ask, and I'll definitely help you out in terms of what type of thing we learn about in this deep dive video. But without further ado, let's see what they have to say in the video.
Hey everyone, this is Gern Summel, Senior Game Designer for NHL 25. Today I'm here to talk to you about franchise mode. So there's a few new things going into franchise mode, everything from a brand new stream.
Okay, I already want to just like kind of jump in here. As you can see right off the hop, you can see franchise mode has a completely revamped hub. And this hub, I think, is just exactly what we kind of needed for franchise mode, because the other one was kind of like the same thing for the last few years, lacked a lot of information. However, now you can see here, you get a ton of different information on the screen. Let me remove my face so you guys could see a little bit of everything. So basically, you get your calendar, which is nice, so you can see obviously what's happening in terms of your winning games, losing games. You also get nice little information on like the projected goaltenders and how good the goaltenders have been in those games, so you can kind of make the decision if you want to maybe put your backup in for a game if you actually alternate goalies manually. You also get your matchup stats, so you get to see how like your team's goal for is versus goals against, all that type of thing, power play percentage comparison. So that way you kind of know if your team's kind of like the better of the two teams right off the hop without having to go to player stats and check all that stuff out yourself. You can also see the team leaders in points, which is a nice little touch too. So once again, don't have to go to the player stats menu to take the look at this, or the team stats. You can literally see this on the main menu. Aside from that, you also got stuff up here like the box scores as per usual. Up here will be interesting because there's some later stuff that I'll talk about when we get to that stage, but you'll see some more information on that. You also can see down on this side here, you basically just navigate with the bumpers, and you can get through all the stuff that you normally would through in franchise mode. And you could easily get to the calendar just by pressing X. You could also alternate here with the triggers between the stats you see. So you could see the standings also via this portion, which is nice. And yeah, just like I said, it's a lot of information you get without having to navigate a bunch of menus, which I think is a very helpful thing to have in user experience.
Streamlined hub, box scores, game logs, and split stats.
Yeah, so they're going through a lot of stuff really quickly in this part, but obviously they'll break it down a little bit more once we get to that part.
Contract clauses and CBA updates, revamped player and coach conversations, and some community requested tuning changes that we did.
Okay, so they're starting off with the franchise hub, which is what I was just mentioning about. So
over here, we have our brand new streamlined hub. It's a unique change from previous years. The goal here was to...
Yeah, so you can see one part here. I don't want to break this down as we go. I kind of want to just do it individual segments, but you could see here, which was part of it. Right here, you have like conversation systems, so you will be able to have conversations with your players and stuff like that regarding like maybe if you want to give them a goal of how much goals to score. You'll see more of that type of stuff later, which is very interesting what they could do eventually with the conversation system, which hasn't like I haven't had to use the conversation system that much before NHL 25. Wasn't a huge fan of it, but I think the stuff that they're looking to add to the conversation system, I think will improve franchise mode a bit, like giving a player some goals to hit, maybe giving the coach an idea of what you want your team to achieve. And I think it definitely could be a useful feature if it's fleshed out enough.
Here was to make less tabbing and surface more information.
Yeah, pretty much as I was mentioning, less tabbing stuff, like it doesn't take as long to navigate.
So you'll see a brand new quick links on the left hand side here, everything that's...
Yeah, quick links, you have your options to take a look at the player stats directly, morale, all that stuff. If you have morale on, that is. Coaching staff, so it's really literally easy to navigate.
Showing up here. So all that stuff that needs to be done on a more regular basis is there at your fingertips. You'll also notice a bunch of new widgets that are on the screen. You'll have the projected goalie widgets. I'll show you the goalies that are about to start for that.
Oh yeah, they're mentioning now the projected goalie scene that I was mentioning. Another thing I didn't mention about this menu, I'll show you guys in a second here. As you can see on the bottom, if my VLC would stop just getting in the way here, but you can see on the bottom, you have that information ticker as well, which is very nice. That's obviously from the trade deadline minigame. I really like that they put this in this menu as well, because it almost gives it more of a feel of like you're watching like a TSN broadcast in a sense, and you can see like who is leading the league in points and all that stuff as you're going on through franchise. So literally, you don't even have to navigate really much menus at all to see the type of stats you want to see, unless you're going more in depth with player stats and that type of thing.
Right-hand side, a matchup widget showing you how you're matching up against
the matchup stuff.
about to play, as well as the
there's the standings that I was just mentioning about, and you can see team leaders, rookie points, the leaders and the stuff, goalie wins. So you literally get all that information without having to, like I said, just go back in menus.
Points, all the way down to rookie and goalie wins, and then you have your league leader stats.
Oh yeah, league leaders as well.
On top of that, we've added the
nice.
ticker that's in the trade deadline minigame at the bottom, which will continuously feed you information as you go from screen to screen as well. You're able to access the calendar, and then also tab through to go through all the various tabs that you would have had access.
Yeah, basically what I was mentioning before we even got into this portion. I guess I got a little ahead of myself, but it won't.
Going into...
Oh, here's the thing that's like one of the things that I'm very excited about. He's going to obviously go more in depth with it, but box scores, this has returned. So, actually, I don't know if it was ever an NHL title, was it? I'm trying to think. I know it was in 2K games, but I don't know if it's ever been in an EA NHL title. So you'll be able to see the box scores for every single game in the NHL during that season and in the AHL as well, just by going over to the box screen portion, which, as you saw here on this main screen, if you press Y, you will be able to enter the box screen menu, where you can basically see all that stuff, and you can literally take a look at who scored in each of these games. You could see the 3 stars of the games. Like, it definitely adds a lot more story to franchise mode, I think, because if you wanted to see when your player scored his 50th goal of the season, which might have been like a milestone goal, you could find that out just by like scrolling through the games and seeing, oh look, he scored his 50th goal against maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I really like that they brought this into franchise mode. This has been something I've wanted to see for a long time, just to give it, like I said, more depth and more story to the mode. You also do see which teams are technically in a grudge match. So obviously these grudge matches will generate throughout franchise mode. You will have some that begin in franchise mode depending if your teams are rivals or not. You can build up those rivalries, as they mentioned before about grudge matches and stuff. And also, if you're using created teams in franchise mode, from what I heard, is you start with an empty canvas of grudge matches, so you don't have any like teams that you're grudge matched against, but your teams will actually generate grudge matches based on teams that they play. So if you're having created teams in franchise mode, you won't have anything to start, but you will eventually build up those rivalries, which is cool, and will also be shown in the box score department. You could also see right off this part who scored like the game-winning goal in these games, which is nice. You could see the standings from that standpoint as well. And then if you click on the games, you'll be able to see the information that I was just mentioning.
Into box scores, we'll bring up all the games that are played in the NHL. So all 1,300 plus games, or if you have a custom league, all however many games.
You could also see like it's like sorted by month and stuff, so you could literally go from November to December and all those months, so you could see individual months if you want to. You could check look at the AHL if you want to see how your AHL players are doing, if you have some good prospects down there. So it's very exciting.
You can go to any game, not just your own teams. You can go to any game and select a game and view.
And then you get the screen that you normally see when you're simulating games.
From that game.
You get all the fights and penalty minutes as well, which is nice.
As well as the stats for each individual player on both teams.
And you get the stats like face-offs and all that stuff
as well. So you get a really good snapshot of everything.
And I meant to put my face back on screen, actually, for that matter. Oops. I don't know when I removed it, but oh well. So anyways, yeah, that's very exciting stuff.
Motif that we got going on. We also have added new game logs and split stats for each.
This is another big thing, game logs and split stats.
I can check.
So you could literally take a look at Elias Pettersson. You could see his stats like you normally would see in franchise mode already before the game, like so in NHL 24, 23, 21, etc. But now, instead of full career stats, you could also go to game logs in split stats. So you'll be able to see each individual game from that season that the player played, how good they did during those games. So you could be like, oh, so-and-so is on a 5-game goal scoring streak. So-and-so hasn't scored in a month. Maybe I want to take him out of the lineup. You just get a lot more in-depth knowledge that you need to make these decisions on which players you want to keep in your lineup. Maybe which ones you want to trade away because they haven't scored in a month or something like that. And in the split stats, you could also see who they're really good against. Like maybe one guy is very good against like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe you want to put him in the lineup when you're playing Toronto, but when you're playing somebody else, maybe you want to have him as a healthy scratch. So it will give you information like that, how good they've been during specific months, during the last 10 games. It's a very helpful thing.
Stats. Now you got game logs and split stats. So if we're going to game log, I can look at.
Here you go. There's the game log stats. You can see versus the Rangers, Elias had no points. He did pick up an assist against Chicago. You can see he was a -1, had 4 shots. You can see how much penalty minutes he took, his time on ice as well. So it's, yeah, just like I said, it's a lot of information you get. And I think this definitely adds more story to franchise mode, just kind of like the box scores and all that, because you can kind of dissect each individual game rather than kind of just basing it off of like how much points they got in the season and be like, okay, he must have had an okay season, but then you could kind of see the underlying numbers now. Maybe he didn't have a good month of March, but he had a good month of November, something like that.
Game that he has played in this year, the standard stats that we track from minutes, shots, goals, assists, points, the date of the game, and the opponent of the game as well. So you can see how that player is doing against every single team on a per game basis. In addition, you can also see the split stats.
Yeah, so the split stats here is the last 10 games. So you can see the stats from the last 10 games. He's got 9 points in 10 games. He's been good as of late. On home ice, he's got 7 points in 11 games, so he's also been good. But so far on the road, he has not scored a single goal, which is kind of interesting. And then you can see versus within the division, the Western Conference, Eastern Conference, how much points he's picked up with the Canucks. And then you could also see as it'll scroll probably games, against each individual team.
Their away split, their division split.
Which, yeah, down here you can see against Florida, he had an assist. And yeah, just it adds a lot more ease of access in a sense for stats and more in-depth stats too.
And on top of that, they're monthly and then they're per.
I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but oh well. So yeah, this is something I really like.
And then lastly, we've also added an awards tab.
Yep,
to the player
this is another big thing, the awards tab. So after they get through that part, you can see that Elias won the Calder back in 2018-19. So this thing obviously has been a thing in like MLB The Show for a little bit. I'm pretty sure other sports titles do this as well. Like 2K obviously does it. So this is something that it's been a long time coming, so to speak, to NHL. And I'm glad that they finally added it as well. Because once again, I know I've been repeating myself a lot, but it adds a lot more story to franchise mode. So now you could be like, oh, I wonder how much Norris trophies so-and-so has won at this point in time. Because maybe it's past the 5 years that you've done in the last in a little bit of franchise mode, so you can't necessarily tell how much Norris is a guy won. Well, now you'll be able to go to like their player card and be like, oh, so and so won 3 Norrises over the last 7 years. Okay, that's interesting. So it's awesome like that. You could also see how much Stanley Cups they've won too, which also adds for a little bit more characteristic to their story and all that. So you'll be able to make those choices on who should be like, for instance, like me with the Channel Hall of Fame. If I wanted to induct a guy into a Channel Hall of Fame, I'll be able to tell how much hardware they had right away, rather than having to basically try and go through all my seasons, all my old videos, and determine how much awards they had in that season, those 25 years or whatever they played.
Award that player has won throughout their entire career. So it's not just the last 5 years. If you have
Alex Ovechkin, you go. See, now you have Alex Ovechkin. You can see he won the Cup in 2017-18. He won the Conn Smythe. He's got his Harts. He got his Ted Lindsay, his Art Ross, obviously the 9 Maurice Richard. So this will just clean up a lot of things, and you'll be able to see some generated players probably with some insane award trophy cabinets. So really much like that.
It'd be something that he won back in the 2010s. All that shows up on this screen and for you to play and look at with throughout the course of franchise mode.
Oh yeah, now we get into contract negotiations. This is also some very exciting stuff.
One of our biggest fan requests is we added no move, no trade clauses to the game.
Yep, no move, no trade clauses, and all type of clauses are in the game. Yeah, which is exciting and makes for a lot more difficulty for franchise mode, especially if you want to run teams like the New York Islanders, for instance. Because shout out to Lou Lamoriello, because that team has too many clauses, in my opinion.
In addition, we also overhauled our contract negotiation system to fit that in. So now you'll notice when you come into the free agency screen.
And then, yeah, contract negotiations are a bit different this year because you obviously see their organizational interest. Some players will not have any interest to sign with you whatsoever. So you might not even be able to entice them to come to you in free agency. It's not like in the past where you could literally sign any free agent you want if you overpay on them. Some of them might not want to come to your team.
You'll see an org interest bar. Every single player has a contract interest bar. and a
Yeah, see, there's a contract interest bar, but also an organization interest bar. So you could have a player who has a lot of interest in your contract you're offering them, but are they interested in your organization in particular? They might not be.
organization interest bar, and those will now dictate whether or not a player will want to sign with your team. So if a player has a very low organization bar, you may need to convince him to actually join your team. Those two.
Yeah, if it has a low organization thing, you might need to actually try and convince them to actually join your team rather than trying to just give them a lot of money, because you might actually have to kind of like you talk to them. Like you could get into like actual, like you could see it says on the bottom, start negotiation. You could be like kind of sell them on why your market is a good market. And yeah, you could actually have like a little bit of like it's like the conversation system with them basically.
Two bars now dictate and change who you target in free agency, because it may not be possible for you to get the best free agent because they may not like your organization because of the taxes that you have.
Yeah, your organization might have a lot of taxes, so maybe that's why their organization meter might be down, because maybe you're in a state that has a lot of taxes, so they might take that into account when trying to maybe negotiate about signing with your team.
The market size that you have,
Market
your
size
status as a contender.
And yeah, contender status, obviously that makes
want
sense.
to be playing on a championship team and you're a rebuilder, they may not want to join your team. Now, you can offer them other incentives. You'll see promises on the bar.
Yeah, you could offer them other incentives, so you have some promises and requests, so the player might request specific things from you. You might be able to make promises on certain things to get that negotiation done.
Player requests. Certain players will have requests that they will...
See, some players might request to be on the first line power play, and you will be like, maybe I can't give him first line power play because I already have enough studs on there, so maybe I have to have him on the second power play unit. Maybe he won't accept that contract because he's not getting that chance to play on the first power play unit.
Like to have, like playing on the top line power play or playing in the first line. And you'll also be able to give out clauses. So
yeah, and in the clauses you'll be able to give out, which is nice. You can see here, Leon Draisaitl, you're offering him currently a 7-year no movement clause. So for those no movement clause years, you will not be able to trade him unless you get him to waive that no movement / no trade clause, which is pretty enticing too. So you might be stuck with him for all 7 years unless you could try and convince him to waive in like the later years of his contract.
You'll see that you can give out no movement clauses, no trade clauses, modified no trade clauses.
Yeah, see, no trade clauses, modified no trade clause, which is it says 4-team no trade clause. So you can literally have like players that have lists of teams that they'd be interested in going to, and you could trade them to those teams, but you can't trade them to any other teams other than those 4 teams. So it might limit you to what you could actually get back for that player.
You can give out different structures, whether
and then you have those type of ones. Like you have all these clause information.
The number of teams that you can or cannot be traded to. So we've added a lot of.
And then there's trade protection as well, which adds like more teams basically to that he doesn't have to get traded to. So you could literally have a player that has interest in only maybe 3 teams to get dealt to. Other players might be interested in like 10 teams. And that way you have to kind of think about if you want to move on from that player in a few years. And if you do want to move on from them, how much teams do you want to have interested in them? Because obviously if you limit the amount of teams that they have, you could deal them to, you might not be able to get a great return really for them.
Depth and a lot of fidelity.
So you can see as that trade protection goes up, the amount of teams goes up.
Wasn't there before.
So you have that 24-team no trade clause. So literally he could only get dealt to 8 different teams in the league, which does limit him a little bit. So it's not great if you do something like that. You might want to put him down to something less than that, just so that way you have more options to trade him to later on. But obviously he will make a decision to accept or not.
I'll go into a player that doesn't want to sign with my team currently. Give you an example of what I mean in terms of you have to persuade that player. Now, Sam Bennett here.
Okay, so he's going to show off the persuasion
want
now
to join my
in
team.
this.
You're able to do certain actions to potentially win.
Enter negotiation, and you get into the basically, like I was saying, like the conversation system. You got charm, neutral, 2-way. So you could kind of like try and persuade them.
Harm them. You can gain some organization interest if they take to it. So in this case it did, which is great. Now you can
Yeah, see, there's like the organization stuff. Let me share about why our organization would be a great fit for you, why our contract, that
Talk
type of
about the
thing.
contract or go into the organization and kind of pitch
Just
them
try
on
and
the
like persuade them to actually
So if
want
I go
to
into here, I
get
can now
that
pitch him on the market
interest
size and
higher in
team
the
status
organization.
and persuade him into wanting
You can see
to
about the market, see
join
the team
my
status.
team and forego
So
his
obviously that will help
expectation
things,
of
but
preferring
it's
to play
also
in
a little bit
small
of a
markets
risk
like
too,
Florida.
and it
So
can lower the chances of him wanting to sign
in this
with you.
case, it's very risky.
See, he went persuade, and the persuasion was a success. So he's just like, I like that perspective. So then he gets maybe a little bit more organizational interest.
It may negatively affect the organization, which may basically mean I'm out of the running completely. But if I do persuade him and it is successful, I can get him to join my team. So in this case, it's successful. And then if I go into organization, you'll see the bar go up to full. So now I have persuaded him into wanting to potentially join my team, which is huge. So he went from not interested at all to being persuaded into joining my team. And now I can.
And now see, he was persuaded into having interest in the team, so the organizational interest went up. And now you can see that he could offer him a contract with maybe a chance of him accepting.
Contract. The first offer that you see here, the number of years, will always be what that player wants. You can go through and select.
So the first year they show is for what the player actually wants, but then afterwards you could kind of alter it and say, hey, maybe I want to offer him a 3-year deal, because 5 years is what Sam Bennett's trying to get. But you don't have to offer
them that. They may or may not accept a 1-year deal. So if you do select 1 year or 2 years, they may say, I'm not interested in that, and just end the conversation there. But if you go into the 4 years, they will let you go in and start negotiating. So negotiate, we'll try to make a more team-friendly deal. So the higher your organization bar, the more.
Oh, we still have like 11 minutes to go through. Hopefully I'm not rambling too much in this, and hopefully this video is not too redundant. But
extra money.
A lot of exciting more stuff to show you guys as we go through this video.
Salary here, I can increase it up by a lot or a little, so I'll add $2 million to the salary. But I can also improve the offer further by adding in a clause, so I can give him a full move, no trade, whatever it may be.
Yeah, so you can basically just negotiate the full contract directly through the conversation system.
So he will more than likely now want to sign because I have given him the world. You can also table the contract as well. So if you think you've negotiated a deal with the player to the sense, but you want to try out and sign another player just in case, you can table the deal. There's a risk to this, obviously. If another team steps in,
I didn't realize this. Okay, that's cool.
They may get taken and may sign with another team. So.
Yeah, I didn't see this when I was testing it. So you could table the contract. So if you want to go for another right winger at the same time as Sam Bennett, you could basically give a contract length or something like that he has to get back to you by then, or else maybe you're going to leave his offer off the table.
It's kind of a risk reward on your aspect of it too, whether or not you're willing to take that chance. So in this case, Sam Bennett accepts your offer because it was so good.
And also, there's immediately an accept on the contract offer too, which is nice. So not all players will accept on the first day that you offer them a contract, but you will get guys sometimes that accept right away, and you're still on July 1st without simulating a calendar day. So this is kind of nice, so that way you don't have to wait those 4 days or whatever to necessarily hear back from everybody. You might be able to sign the player you want on the first day of free agency.
I gave him a full no move. I gave him $2 million more, and I also gave him a first line promise. So he's now on my team. So I can literally convince him from not wanting to join my team to joining my team through the power of the conversation engine. So next up with the
now the clause stuff more.
No trade clauses. Obviously, when you want to go and trade a player that has a trade clause, you're going to need to figure out what team they can or cannot be traded to.
So yeah, now when you want to go trade players, this is the thing I was mentioning.
If you go to Aaron Ekblad here, you'll see he has a
this video was like glitching a little bit.
Modified
here. There he is. Okay. So you can see that Aaron Ekblad has a modified no trade clause. Well, look, he has a tradable team list, 20 teams. You could only trade him to those teams. You cannot trade him to any other teams, or else it will remove him from the trade options. So you will be able to deal him to any of those teams. But obviously, like I was mentioning before, if a player has like only a few teams that they could be dealt to, you might not get a solid return for that player. So it's a lot of juggling around with the contracts and making sure that you actually get a contract that you want with these players.
No trade clause, and you can go into the new contract info screen that shows you the trade clause, the years that are left on the trade clause, and the teams that can trade that player to.
So those are for just modified no trade clauses and stuff like that. So you will be able to move these players, which is nice, but you can only limit them to a certain amount of teams.
Anaheim or Boston or Buffalo, he is an eligible player for me to actually put on the trade.
See, he has interest in Anaheim's on his clause list, so basically he could be dealt to Anaheim.
If I
But if he puts him like,
put him on a team that he doesn't
yeah.
have a trade clause for, I would need to actually convince Ekblad.
Oh, I didn't even see this with the modified no trade. But if you wanted to try and trade him to, say, Carolina, which wasn't on this list, you could initiate a conversation if he would be interested in waiving it to go basically to Carolina.
To waive his no trade clause. So you can go into the proposed trade screen, select the player that you want to trade, and it'll.
This also works with the like the no trade clause people and no movement clause.
I'll have to persuade the player.
So you have to kind of ask them. See, it says like, we would like to waive your clause so we could trade you. And see, there's a chance that it might not work. The player might want to say, hey, I'm not waiving it to go to this team. But it does lower your management morale and stuff like that a bit.
It failed, which means I can no longer.
See, it failed. Now he cannot be dealt to Carolina.
Be eligible to be traded to the Carolina Hurricanes. The other way to get them to talk about their clauses or their options is to actually go in through the new franchise hub.
And then, yeah, you could talk about their contract stuff directly in this conversation area as well, if you want to.
To Matthew Tkachuk here, I have different options to have him potentially waive his clause or change his clause for the year. I'm able to get him to maybe give me a list of 1 team, 2 teams, 3 teams, or outright waive.
I just think this is a great thing to have because that makes him a lot tougher to move people. Because, like, if, for instance, if you were doing the New York Islanders in franchise mode, as I was mentioning earlier, Lou Lamoriello has a lot of clauses on a lot of his players on his team, I think. It would be difficult probably to get every single player moved out on that roster so you could actually start a rebuild. So it definitely adds a lot more in-depth decisions, and obviously you don't necessarily want to take on too bad of a team in terms of like clauses, or else you might have a very long rebuild, which I think the Islanders are in for.
So now I can go into Matthew Tkachuk's player card and figure out who he actually wants to be traded to. Now you can see that he has a modified no trade clause, but going to his contract info, he wants to go to the Montreal Canadiens.
So they got a list though finally, because if you talk to Matthew Tkachuk, who had a no movement clause, and then he gives you a modified no trade clause if you get him to like give you a team he's interested in. He only has interest in one team, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. So you would have to trade him away to Montreal.
I can now add him to the block for the Montreal Canadiens, and then you'll be able to make a trade. The conversation engine allows you to kind of have a little bit of flexibility and how much you want that player to waive, whether it be fully waive their clause or to kind of select a certain amount of teams. It allows you to pick a riskier or less riskier option to give the player still some agency as well.
And then the conversation engine, I don't know what they're going to talk about in this. There's a lot of it they've shown.
Feature that we've added is our brand new conversation engine. You've seen a little bit of it.
Yeah. This is more of what I was talking about with like the season goals. So you could literally get a player to say, hey, maybe I'll try and score 40 goals this season.
No move, no.
And then same with the coaches. You could kind of assign what your coach should be striving for, if you should be striving for the playoffs this season,
but we
or rebuilding,
conversation
that type of thing.
Important and have a meaningful impact on your team. So gone are the ice time conversations where players are complaining about things. It's now more of a proactive system where you.
No, that's an interesting thing. I said gone is the ice time complaints and stuff like that. So that's huge, because I know that when you have morale on and conversation system stuff, it just was really annoying how players were like, hey, I'm not getting enough ice time.
Assigning players goals or trying to make that player better or try to fit into your system as you need to. If I go into Orchinski here, you'll notice that there's 2 options for me to select from: season goal or on ice play. Each of these has their own subset of items that you'll be able to select.
Yeah, season goal, on ice play.
This actually influences player development, something that in the past
it helps player development too, which is also things you can try and get them to play a bit more different on the ice.
You can select a season goal. You'll have 2 options of short-term goals. So these are half-season goals. They're shorter goals and they give you less of a reward potentially. And then we have long-term goals, which allow you to perform a stat challenge, an award challenge, and then an X Factor challenge. These challenges.
Oh yeah. You could give them a stat challenge or an award challenge, and that could help them out in terms of gaining attributes and stuff like that.
Give a player potentially
and X Factor stuff
ability,
too,
whether it be a zone or a superstar ability. Award challenges are asking a player to win an award, and by winning that award, they may gain attribute points as well. And then you have stat challenges, which you may ask a player to score X amount of goals, assists, or plus minus or block shots, and they will gain potential ratings impact onto themselves based off of completing that goal. Now, it isn't that it's a hard line, so as long as I'm close, he'll get some of that reward to passing.
So if he gets close to it, he could get some of that reward, but if he doesn't get it, he will not get like the X Factor, for instance, I think. But if he gets close to like the assist goal, maybe he'll get a bit more passing stats.
But he may not get the full amount. So it is really forgiving in that sense. But you do want to get
That's why it says +1 to +4 in passing, is because if he reaches like 35, he probably would still get some to his passing.
Score 40 assists, and then once that's in there, you'll be able to check out the goal in the morale screen as you sim through a season.
I haven't tried too much with this goals and promising when I was playtesting, but that's pretty cool.
Now that I've assigned a player goal to that player, I can also go into the on-ice play and potentially have them change their play style or their position. You'll notice on the upper right-hand side of the
you could try and get them to change their play style or position based on this on-ice play part.
You have something called adaptability. Every player has adaptability rating. This adaptability rating allows us to control how likely a player will potentially adhere to being able to change to a new playing style or a position that they play. The younger the player, it'll actually make it a little bit more easier for that player to be a little bit more malleable and a little bit more easier for them to learn that new play style or position. So an older player will be a little bit more set in their ways and may not be able to.
That's interesting. Older player might be already kind of set in stone what the type of player they are in terms of position and all that, but younger players you might be able to I guess try and like say, hey, maybe you should work on your face-off so you could be a centerman for my team. That
switch to that position or play style, but true to real life as well. So in this instance here, we're able to look at these two options of play style and position. I'll select to change his position. It'll give me options to be either straight up, change him out of left defense. I can move him to right defense as well. These are both persuades and they have different factors that weigh in. So in this case, I want to add a secondary position to lower his defensive awareness rating. The harder it will be to convince him. If I want to change his position, players with higher defensive awareness rating will be harder to convince. So players that are really good at defense, they probably don't want to move out from defense. But if the player has a lower defensive awareness, you may be able to get them to change to a forward. Here I'll ask Korchinski to change his position. So in this case, that persuade failed. In many cases, the persuade may or may not work, but you do have the ability to change a player's position and play style.
Yeah, so you could change a player's play style and position if you want to, but you don't necessarily. If you have like a conversation with them, I don't think it guarantees that you change their position, but you could kind of like see if they want to try a different position based on the conversation system.
Multitude of different factors that go into it. Again, we really wanted to give you as the user the ability to have more fidelity, more control over the players to fit within the system that you're trying to build. So in addition, you can also talk to your head coach. You can talk about your preseason or your game plan for the team. And these essentially are buffs to your team that you get for the season, whether it be conditioning, strength training, skill training, 5-on-5 focus, power play, penalty kill, video sessions. So all of these will have different buffs and debuffs. I've selected power play. This will give my team a buff for the power play, but also
that's good. I didn't even try this stuff out. So you could give them a preseason focus where certain things are getting a little bit better than it should be. That way you could kind of get more knowledge if your power play is performing good enough.
A debuff on my penalty kill. So in this case, I got him to adhere to that preseason focus. I can go back in and talk to him also about the game plan that he has. So we can talk about preferred lines. As he is locked until the regular season, and I'll get into that as well.
Preferred lines locked till the regular season. Ice time allocation.
Ice time allocation is also locked until the regular season, but this will allow you to allocate whether or not you want your team to roll 4 lines, 3 lines, top heavy. It allows you to kind of manipulate that and have the...
Oh, so it's more flexible with your coaches, so you could get them to roll 3 lines and stuff like that. So you could basically change those like coaching stats in a sense, like what they're good at, what they're not so good at, to better fit your roster. Or vice versa, you can get your roster to fit your coach or your coach to fit your roster.
Best possible situation for your team. So now that we're here in the regular season, I'm now able to chat with my coach. So if I'm in the edit line screen, I can hit the Y button to go into strategies and then bring up the coach card from here. I can go into this meeting availability and then chat with the coach about their game plan. So I can now talk to them about their preferred lines or ice time allocation.
as that's no longer locked, that can get them to potentially change.
So that stuff opens up at the start of the regular season.
I want them to reorganize or lock players.
Yeah, I didn't really get super in depth when I was playtesting this part of it, but that's cool to see.
If in the instance where it fails, you can still force the coach to go through this flow. You will lose morale as a trade-off, but at the end of the day, you are the GM and you hire the coach, so you are able to brute force your way through it. So in this case, I want to look at my forwards and I want to have my line 2 center be Elias Pettersson. So if I go into line 2 and center, I can now lock in Elias Pettersson as the center for that line. Now I can also
lock players into specific lines.
In this instance, I'll just put Jake DeBrusk. And then if I go into that align screen again, you'll notice that when I hit best lines now, those players should now get into that slot. You now see Elias Pettersson.
That's actually pretty sick. So if you get them to confirm stuff through the conversation system, when you go coach preferred lines, it'll actually move Elias Pettersson to playing with Jake DeBrusk based on what he just did. So that's actually really sick. I didn't even realize that at all, but that kind of makes coach preferred lines actually something better. You can kind of manipulate what your coach preferred lines are.
And Jake DeBrusk in that role. So if I move Pettersson down to the 4th line here and then I hit best lines, it will always lock them into that line.
See, now the head coach preferred lines, it puts them back to line 2.
Into the lineup, it will remember that and put them back into the right spot.
I like that a lot, actually. That's
lock all your lines exactly how you want it and really help the usability for playing with injuries on. So you're able to have your lines always constructed in the way that you want them, and the coach will make sure that they do best lines in that manner. It is quite a cumbersome thing. So this was our way with the power of the conversation engine to allow you to actually lock in players into those lines.
And now community requests. This is some interesting stuff.
Another feature that we added to really help the roster sharing community was the addition of draft picks to the player movement screen. Now you're able to trade 5 years worth of draft picks in the player movement screen to keep up with the real world as you're waiting for the latest roster update from us.
Yep, see, you can literally move draft picks outside of franchise mode now up to 5 years. So even for like me, this is a big thing because doing throwback rosters, I can literally say since for 2009-10, I'm doing for my first roster build, by the way, I can literally move Toronto's first round picks to the Boston Bruins instead because of the Phil Kessel trade. And then Toronto doesn't have first round picks for the first 2 years. And then also if you're doing modern rosters, obviously if players are getting dealt for picks and stuff like that, you can literally update it through this part. And it's very nice that they finally added this. This is something I know Tugi, Tactics, and I have always wanted. And I'm glad that they decided to finally address something like this and do it.
So in this case, I can trade Anaheim's and Edmonton's first round pick to the Buffalo Sabres, and then you'll be able to go in and see that Buffalo has Anaheim and Edmonton's first round pick, and you're able to upload this roster file to roster sharing.
Yeah, but then obviously you can move, like in roster sharing, you'll be able to see all these picks move between teams. So if you really wanted to be dumb and break the game probably, I would say, hey, you can move all the picks to one team, but I don't think that would be something that the game would like so much. But literally this makes just franchise mode a lot better too, because obviously roster sharing makes franchise mode a lot better. So I just think this is just going to make a very interesting thing with, like, say, roster builds, having no movement clauses, getting stuff like these moved, like the picks moved for realistic rosters, for throwback rosters. Like, a lot of this stuff is stuff that people have recommended to EA, and they finally added a lot. So I'm very, very pleased with a lot of this stuff.
And you'll be able to have others download it with the correct draft picks, and you can then start your franchise mode when the latest trade comes out and you're waiting for the roster update. You'll be able to make the adjustment yourself and then go into franchise mode and start your franchise mode if you need to.
That's a big change there, as well as we've added a few more elite potential prospects into the draft. Make the league as you get.
Ah, that's interesting. They've added a few more elite prospects into the draft too. That's something I didn't even realize. So there's more elite players in the first round sometimes than there used to be, which is kind of nice.
Later into later years, refresh that player pool, have the overall be around the same amount as well. So
we added a lot to franchise mode this year. We had a lot of fun working on the game, and we can't wait for you to pick up early access on September 27th.
Okay, well, that is the full rundown on what's coming to franchise mode. I liked a lot of those things. I've gotten the playtest with pretty much everything that they just showed in this video. Obviously, like I said, the conversation system, I didn't get to play super in depth, but A lot of this is promising stuff. A lot of this is stuff that I know people have wanted in the mode. Like the clauses have definitely been something that's been wanted for a while. The more in-depth stats, the box scores. I just think it adds, like I said, another dimension to franchise mode. Like, it's going to be a familiar franchise mode in the sense that some of the menus are obviously still the same, and but with all this like kind of new additions and stuff like that, it kind of gives it a refreshing feeling that it hasn't had in a while. Like, I feel like almost in a way, this is the most stuff that they've ever added to franchise mode within a dev cycle. I could be wrong, but I honestly don't remember the last time they added this much stuff within 1 year. So I think this has been a great year for franchise mode. I'm excited to see what you guys think of it as well. I know a lot of people wanted like stuff like franchise connected, but let's be honest. I think a lot of these additions will make if they ever decide to do an online franchise mode, I think a lot of these additions to offline will make online better, because obviously if you make the offline version of franchise mode super in depth and then you basically make that mode online, it'll be a lot better than if you make a bare bones offline mode into an online mode. And then a lot of people will actually stick around and still play franchise mode rather than stop playing online franchise mode within the first few months of franchise mode being online, if that ever is a thing. So I think they did a lot of positives this year. I'm looking forward to what you guys think of it down below in the comments. Like I said, if any questions about this video down below, I'll ask me and I will get back to you and try and help you guys out with like what my thoughts are more in depth. But I think this is really promising stuff, and yeah, looking forward to playing this game on the 27th. So anything down below, and I'll see you guys next time.